Hello, this is Hakon, and this is finally, some of you might say, another episode of Ensign 64. And I do realize that for most of my subscribers, they might say, "What's Ensign 64? What's the big deal about? I've never heard of this before, and why does this look like a strange blue screen?" Ensign 64 is my 8-bit computer aficionado alter ego, a character that I created about 2 years ago when I was intending to do more videos about Commodore 64 and 8-bit computing and a little bit of early computing history. And also a bit of this kind of thing with a nice artistic flair as well. But I didn't make many videos back then, and I decided last year that I should merge my Ensign 64 videos with my regular channel as myself, and so this is where it is now. And in my first introductory video to the channel, I did say that one of the things I would be doing was to read computer magazines from the 80s or from the old days, and at the time, I didn't own a single one. I'll tell you a bit of history there. I got my Commodore 64 in late 1985 or early 1986. I'm thinking 86 actually. Spring 1986 sounds like the right time. And I bought my first computer magazine that was the December 1986 issue of Computer Plus Video Games, which was one of the British magazines. And the reason I bought that is it was actually, I think that was the first time I went to a newsstand and I saw a computer magazine that looked appealing to me. I picked it up, I leafed through it, and it looked like it was just the kind of thing I would like to read. It had a lot of reviews, stories, things about current games at the time, and of course the main computer for games at the end of 1986 was the Commodore 64. And of course there was also things about Spectrum and Amstrad, but that was the main computer, and so most of the content of the magazine was relevant to me. And also had a really nice, very striking picture on the cover. If any of you remember the movie poster for the movie Labyrinth with David Bowie on it, it had that picture on or certainly one of the Labyrinth covers, Labyrinth poster pictures on the cover, and it was a really nice picture as well. So that's how I started getting into computer magazines. I'm not sure if Commodore Plus Video Games was my favorite magazine. It was my first magazine, and I did read it regularly for a few years. I even subscribed to it for a year or two, certainly for 1 year. I can't remember if that was renewed. But I also started reading Commodore User, and I also read Compute's Gazette, which is an American magazine that is a little bit more focused towards programming and a little bit less on games. That said, there were of course lots of computer magazines around at the time that didn't have much to do with the gaming platforms, and of course, as far as most people were concerned, certainly the serious computer manufacturers, the Commodore 64 was just a toy. And they would also consider the Spectrum a toy, etc. So even though it was used for business and productivity, it wasn't the best option for those things. And I know that Commodore, they really tried to get into the business market. They just kept trying, and it's one of their big failings is that they never managed to do that, and they spent a lot of money trying. But what they really made their money on was the Commodore 64, of course. But of course, in 1986, the market for computer games had distilled down to just a few platforms that were being used by practically everyone. So it was the Spectrum, the Commodore and the Amstrad. But when you look at older magazines, like from the early 80s until 1982, the landscape is a bit different, and that's one of the things I'll just talk a little bit about today. Because recently I went on YouTube. Not YouTube. I didn't go on YouTube. I go on YouTube all the time, but I didn't go on YouTube for this. I went on eBay, the other place, one of the other places, and I went looking for computer magazines because even though I did read a lot of magazines back in the day, like most other people, I didn't keep them. They were tidied out at some point. I might have kept some more things from the past if it hadn't been for the fact that I had to move country at some point. And of course, when you're moving from one country to another, you really have to cull your stuff down. So at some point, I can't remember exactly when, all my old magazines, they went the way of the dodo. And so I had to get some new ones. So I went on eBay, and I bought some random magazines. I also bought a few that I know that I had back in the 80s. But one of the things that I find interesting when I look at old computer magazines is, well, everything. I mean, the adverts, the letter section, everything. But I do find it fascinating when I look at magazines a little bit older than the ones I had, because the adverts and the contents are a bit different. And one of the reasons is, in the early 80s, let's say until 82, 83, there were a lot more different platforms available. There were more computers. There was Dragon, there was Genie, there was the BBC computers that you didn't hear much about anymore in the mid 80s, or the Hakon BBC and Hakon Atom. There was Texas Instruments. There was Oric. Did I mention Dragon? Dragon was there as well. And all these ones are just sort of fizzled out as becoming either very minor platforms, hardly used by anyone, or they just went out of business and didn't produce any new computers. And of course, if you don't make new computers, at some point you're going to be lagging behind the competition. Nobody will buy your things anymore. So, excuse me, my voice is a bit rusty because it is early morning. And sometimes a little bit of tea helps. So, one of the magazines I picked up from eBay is this one here. Oh, if you can see that. Oh, I was saying that's very hard to see with all this blue stuff on the characters. No, can you see that? Your computer, it says. Okay, I'll change the screen a little bit. Okay, is that better? Your computer? Can you see it now? I'm not sure if that's good enough either, but I'll try. Okay, I'll just remove all the effects. Okay, I'll remove all the effects. So there we are. Your computer, and this is March 1982, and Volume 2, Number 3. So that is the magazine that I'll be talking a little bit about today. Of course, I've been talking about more other things now. So I'm going to change the camera angle now so I can show you the magazine. Right, and here is the magazine on my desk. And I do apologize that the video isn't as sharp as I would have wanted it to be. I'll have to look into alternatives especially with this kind of thing, because well, you can see the bigger writing, I think, so it will have to do for now. Right, I'm going to go in here on the first inside page, because already there is something interesting here. It's the Genie 1 microcomputer, which looks very much like a Tandy Texas Instruments kind of computer. And let's see, and it's like this is quite fun because this is quite a good advert. It's made like almost like a personal advert. Ingenious but lonely.
Genie 1 microcomputer, early 80s, with large peripheral family but currently unattached. Would like to meet interesting, attractively packaged software. Genie or Tandy specification. For programming, problem solving, entertainment, and long lasting friendship. Reply in confidence, box number RS232. And of course, for those of you who don't know, RS232 is one of the main interfaces, universal interfaces of the early 80s, and was used for a lot of peripherals back in the day. So this is before, I suppose it was the USB of the day in many ways. So, and of course the Genie is sold, and of course one of the main marketing things is it's Tandy compatible, and it can use lots of peripherals. Disk drive, expansion box, with extra RAM, printer, monitor, obviously. Yeah. The Genie did not last very long. This is 1982, and I think the 82, 83 probably was the day of the Genie, and then it's one of the ones that fizzled away. Of course, another reason that many of the early 80s computers disappeared was many of them actually needed proprietary software. And if you're a software company, it costs you a lot of money to make a version for each platform. So you do want to focus, first of all, on the major platforms, the one that most people have. And then if you have any extra incentives or anything else, any other good reasons for doing the minor platforms, then you would do those. Tandy was quite a big platform, so this is a kind of computer that could have done well, but maybe the Tandy outsold it. I don't know exactly what happened, but the Genie did not last as long as the TRS-80 did. I don't think so. Right. Let's see. Editorial. First anniversary of the ZX81, apparently. The ZX81, of course, one of the most successful home computers for the early 80s. And of course, ZX80 was hugely popular before that. Let's see. Here it's comparing the BBC. Currently costs £299. The ZX81, it doesn't actually say. Oh, yes, the ZX81, £69.95. I mean, that is ridiculous. £70 for a computer in the early 80s. The VIC-20, £189.95, it says. Let's see. Here we have some other thing. VIC-20, of course, one of the big computers at the time. This was just before the Commodore 64. Apple II Plus, PET still on the market, the Commodore PET. Video Genie, that's the one that was advertised earlier. UK 101, I don't know that one. So that is a different computer that I've not heard of before, and it looks like, just like the Spectrum, you can get it as a kit. So you do some of the assembly yourself. 125 for a kit, 175 for ready built, so roughly twice the price of a Spectrum. But I don't know anything about that. 8K memory. Hakon Atom, of course, the predecessor of the BBC microcomputer. Atari 400 and 800, still major players, although Atari's day was soon going to be numbered when it comes to the home computing market. Let's see what we've got here. Stock program for the ZX81. Of course, people did try to make programs for productivity and for business application. Let's see. Apple programs. Snack Attack. Pac-Man clone. Beer Run. Catch the artisans before the guzzlers and bouncers catch you. How exciting. Ooh, £20. Well, that's quite expensive, actually. Use your Atom for planning, projecting, writing, estimating, scheduling, calculating, recalculating, erasing, revising, critical path analysis with Atom Calc. So that's a spreadsheet. Ooh, this is a fun one. APE software, or APE software, proudly presents the first ever adults-only concept album for the unexpanded ZX81. Concept album. That's a weird choice of words. The Adventures of Geronimo Pratt. And here we have the bullet points. Giggle as we introduce our hero and his faithful canine companion, Bruce. Okay. Gasp as GP drives Uncle Clive's new Porsche. Laugh as Bruce gets his, whatever. Squirm as GP falls foul of a foul seagull. Horror as GP falls into the hands of the Spanish Inquisition and has to save his manhood. Shock at the wanton bloodlust as GP goes on the rampage. Thrill as GP becomes a human cannonball. Sigh as GP finds his true love. Rush or cross-check or postal order for £3.50, including P&P, etc. Warning, it says here in really small type. Although it is unlikely, some of these adult programs may give offense. Right, Geronimo Pratt. There you go. Apparently the first ever adults-only concept album for the ZX81. I'm sure not many others actually called anything a concept album, so maybe that they're the only ones. Let's see. Of course, in the early days of computing like this, you had lots of very sort of independent software makers and writers, sometimes just one person working out of a garage, making programs and then trying to market it in computer magazines like this. There's another small company. I've seen other adverts for these. It did have more than one program. So this is Tyrant of Athens for ZX81. MC Associates, specialists in war games and simulations in the ancient period. Okay. What else do we have? Programming for the ZX81, why not? Special offer for Sinclair owners. Hakon Dealers Association offer £20 off any Hakon Atom kit or build in exchange for any working ZX81. So there you go. If you're tired of your ZX81, you can get a discount on an Hakon Atom. Although I suppose, in hindsight, keeping the ZX Spectrum probably would have kept you in business for longer, as long as it was working. It certainly was lasted a longer time that people were actually making programs for the ZX80 and 81. Genie Dealer, word processor, etc. Letters. I'm not sure there's anything particularly exciting here at the moment. What else have we got? Oh, this is an interesting one. Of course, it's interesting to me because I know the Commodore so well. Commodore International Limited plans to launch 2 new microcomputers this year, the SuperVic and the Commodore 64. I don't know anything about the SuperVic, so maybe that's something that didn't materialize or that just went away really quickly, but apparently at this time there is meant to be something called a SuperVic, as well as a Commodore 64. It says here the SuperVic is a 16K full-color, 40-color micro expected to cost about £212. The Commodore 64 is also a full-color, 40-color micro, but has 64K of inbuilt memory and should cost about £315. In addition, Commodore is planning to introduce Ultimax, a combination of video game, microcomputer, and music synthesizer. A computer membrane keyboard allows the video game to be used as a micro with a built-in memory, while the second keyboard enables the Ultimax to function as a music synthesizer, which can duplicate the sounds of a piano, harpsichord, clarinet, and other musical instruments. None of these 3 machines is likely to be available in Europe until later in the year, or early 1983. Okay, that is interesting. SuperVic and Ultimax. Not heard of those before. In chess news, of course, these days is when chess computers suddenly started getting good enough to do clever stuff that chess players weren't. So in this one, it says that a machine has been able to solve Zagoroyko's chess problem from 1972 in 3 different ways, but of course a chess problem is only supposed to have one solution, so that is quite interesting if you're into chess. BBC Micro price rises was sort of alluded to in the editorial. It went up from, let's see, increased by £75 to £299. That is quite an increase. Enhanced model went up from £335 to £399. Okay. Let's see. Graphics package. That's quite an interesting looking stick. 3D bit or 30-bit stick. Creative system. Is that a D or a... It looks like a D. 3D bit. Bit stick, I think is the... Yeah, it's called bit stick. And it's a drawing peripheral. So maybe that's an analog... Looks like an analog joystick. Oh, that's interesting. Let's see. Micro store with the usual suspects: Hakon, BBC, PET, and Vic. Oh, I thought Hakon and BBC. I thought BBC was Hakon. Anyway. ZX81 RAM packs. Of course, you might want a bit of expansion, but the problem with expansions of memory for any computer in these days is that to maximize profits, most developers of programs, whether it be games or other programs, they would want to, especially games, would want to sell as many as possible, so they wouldn't really want to develop too much for expanded computers. If they did, they would sell fewer units. So they would rather try to use just the basic unexpanded RAM for their programs. I suppose some productivity programs would really benefit from the expanded RAM, and so there would be more of those that needed the expansions. Indeed, it wouldn't surprise me if, in many cases, RAM expansions were actually sold bundled with productivity software as well. Let's see what we got here. TRS-80, so that's a Tandy. The Sharp MZ-80B, another early computer that I haven't heard much about. Hakon Atom, that's fine. Oh, CompuKit UK101. That's the one I was mentioned earlier. I didn't know anything about. 6502 based system. Best value for money on the market. 8K basic. Fastest around. Full QWERTY keyboard. Well, I'd hope so. 1K RAM expandable to 8K. Oh my. That doesn't sound very good value for money to me. Kit only, so that's £100 for a kit, £150 for assembled. Okay, Apple II. Dini 1 and 2, of course, the relatively short-lived one. Oh, well, this is nice. That's another one that I haven't really heard of before. The Lucas NASCOM 3. Also an early computer that probably went away quite soon later. And they've been around since 1977. And Zilog Z80 CPU. Okay. 4 megahertz CPU. Okay, that's... 8K basic and ROM is standard. 8K of static ROM. Okay. ZX81 expansion. Of course, one of the big things about the Commodore 64, when that came, and one of the reasons why it became so successful, is probably it was the first sort of affordable 64K RAM computer, and therefore everything developed for it didn't need any RAM expansions. It didn't need any expansion to be useful. Whereas all these 8 and 16K computers, they really needed a bit of extra space. I mean, 8K, that's hardly enough for the screen memory. Behind the BBC program, so that's about a TV program called The Computer Program. So something about that. Chess computers. That can be quite interesting for those into that. I remember these when I was young, seeing these things. I was never really greatly into chess. I thought it was an interesting game, but not really my thing. Genie software. TRS-80 Genie. So I suppose Tandy and Genie. AJ Edit. Word processor. And of course, in the 82 or quite the early 80s, up until around 1985, pretty much any computer magazine had type-in programs. In the mid-80s, 85 to 86, I would say, more and more magazines, they stopped doing that and focused more on reviews, and especially the games-focused ones, focused more on the reviews. And of course, in the early days, there wasn't... I mean, you didn't have as many games or other programs available to you in many cases, and most of the people couldn't afford them. So as far as lots of early users of home computers, affordable home computers were concerned, one of the ways they actually enjoyed their computer was by typing in programs and games and playing them, and that was such a big part of it. Right, what else have we got here? Galaxy Invasion. Of course, many of the early games you get from many developers are basically clones of Space Invaders, clones of Pac-Man, clones of, well, all those kinds of early games. This looks like one of those. I remember playing a game on an arcade one time. There was sort of tanks driving around. That looks like exactly the same kind of thing. I don't know what the original is called. Asteroids, of course. Yeah. What else have we got here? Oh, 3D adventures. 3D adventures. This is quite early days for 3D, so that's interesting. 3D means that as you wander through the mazes and buildings, full-screen graphic display constantly shows your position in a perspective format as though you were actually there. Oh my. This rat's eye view adds an entirely new dimension to adventure. English language commands can be entered at any time, etc. to manipulate your environment. Command sets are extensive and sophisticated. Dozens of objects are scattered throughout the mazes and buildings. Wow, dozens. You can pick them up, burn them, throw them, etc. You may need the sword to fight off an ugly little man, or a steel rod to hold apart crushing walls. Death Maze 5000 and Labyrinth allow the traditional 1 on 2 world commands. Yeah, okay. Over 500... I say Death Maze and Labyrinth, over 550 locations in one game called Asylum, got 1,200 locations. That is quite a high number, actually. Right. Let's see what else we got. Productivity software for the ZX81. And what's it? Adventure game. Gold, an adventure game. Okay, I don't know that one. Oh, very important information here. Tape hint. Always rewind cassette, keeping their delicate recording surface protected inside the cassette housing. Ah, everyone should know that. Let's see, ZX81 cassette recorder. Didn't one come with... It wouldn't necessarily be automatically bundled, I suppose, with the ZX81, and that costs almost as much as the ZX81. Right, the ZX81 music. Don't think that's as exciting as music on the Commodore 64. That's a lot of ZX81 here. So obviously the ZX80 and 81 were really popular in these days. Of course, they sold huge numbers. Snakes and ladders. Mesmerizing snakes and ladders, not just normal ones. ZX81. Mains filter. For, of course, if you have a computer connected to the mains, the fluctuations in voltage might cause damage if the power supply can't handle it, but usually it should. For those worried, you can get a mains filter. ZX graphics layout sheet can be useful. What else we got? ZX81, 81, 81. Polar coordinate plot. Oh, looking quite nice. Let's see. VIC-20 color computer Hakon Atom. Atari Tangerine Microtan. That is another computer I don't really know anything about, so that is interesting. It looks quite interesting as well. I'll have to look into that one a little bit. So that's another of the contenders for the early market. What have we got here? Silicon Office System. Altus multi-user hard disk system. Oh, let's see. Oh, that's the kind of leasing thing. Let's see, Altus 8000/10 computer with 10 megabyte hard disk. 10 megabyte hard disk, that's quite a lot in 1982. 208 kilobyte of memory, 4 users, 500 kilobyte floppy disk drive, that's also quite a bit. Printer, and from only £43 per week. Well, that is quite a lot of money after a little while. That's a serious computer, it sounds like. Altus and Silicon. Never heard of those before either. There is an article about the RS-232, which I mentioned earlier as the peripheral interface of VIC-20 port, it says. Okay. I didn't know RS-232 was on the VIC-20, but there you go. Oh, a very nice advert here for the ZX81, even though the computer does look quite cheap. The advert's very dark, strong red lettering. Oh, actually this is almost like they've taken the sales sheet pamphlet and just stapled it into the magazine. Right, what have we got here? Sinclair ZX81, $49.95 kit. Well, that's a cute little printer, isn't it? Look at the size of that thing next to the computer. That is tiny. A ZX printer, also £50. Or you can do print screen. A special feature is copy, which prints out exactly what is on the whole TV screen without the need for further instructions. That is good. Printing speed is 50 characters per second with 32 characters per line. 32 characters per line. That is not a lot. This is just like a large receipt printer in a shop, pretty much. A roll of paper 65 feet long and 4 inches wide. Okay, so this is 4 inches wide. And it's got a roll. That is still a nice... I like the look of this thing. And there's the RAM expansion back there as well. It's very cute, I would say. A nice design. It really goes with the ZX81. Let's see, comparing the ZX81 with the ZX80, Hakon Atom, TRS-80, PET, Apple II. Different basic features, it looks like. Different basic commands. Okay. More memory expansion. It looks like there's a recurring theme here. There's so much about memory expansion for the ZX81. So obviously the memory was a bit on the small side. Computer Fair. The Computer Fair, April 23rd to April 25th, 1982, Earl's Court, London. That would have been a nice place to go in those days. There would have been so many computers there that never saw the light of day afterwards. First choice, fourth for control. So fourth is about the programming language, I presume. I don't know anything about the fourth programming language. I know some computers used fourth as a sort of native or the sort of the basic interpreter. Instead of having basic, it would go when you go into the system like you do on a VIC-20 or a Commodore, you go into basic. On some computers, you go into the system and you go straight into fourth. I'll have to look into fourth a little bit so I can tell you more about it. It does say Forth is an ideal language in which to write routines, to take information from special purpose switches. Okay. So maybe it's a good language for interfaces and things like that, and also subroutines, of course, which you can do in Pascal and things as well. But it's BASIC isn't the greatest for subroutines. What have we got here? Random numbers. Of course, there is no such thing as a random number, especially on computers. This looks like it's a quasi-random number because it starts by user input, which is minutes past the hour. It doesn't even use can't even use a clock in the computer. You could do that on the Commodore 64, I believe. So use a user input as the starting seed, and then you take that number and you add pi, and you take that number to the power of 5, and then you remove all the whole numbers and just get a number between 0 and 1, and that's your random number. Well, random number. That's what it does. I wonder how efficient that is. So number plus pi added together and to the power of 5. That's a strange. Why choose that? I don't know. ZX keyboard. That looks a bit wonky. Oh, 1982, a computer magazine has a column called Fingertips. And Fingertips is a regular calculator column covering calculator news, programming hints, and examples of unusual applications. You don't see many magazines these days, or even a few years later, having a calculator column. I think that's quite interesting. Okay, what have we got here? In television, of course, the TV game, Atari TV game, handheld games, of course, Earth Invaders. That's probably like Space Invaders. Well, I suppose the Space Invaders, they don't invade space, they invade Earth, or shouldn't it be called Earth Invaders? It's invaders from space. But there you go. Right. Pet title from Nick Hampshire. Pet graphics, library of pet subroutines, and pet revealed. Looks serious. Nice logo there. Nice design of this advert. Actually, I quite like that one. Adventure games. Let's see. Dungeons, Dragons, Dwarves, and Hidden Treasure. We look at the history of adventure games and itemize the suppliers. So this is an advert for Practical Computing magazine. Oh, let's move it up. It's an advert for Practical Computing magazine. So obviously they have an adventure game special. Adventure games were absolutely massive in the early days of home computers, of course. And one of the reasons why is because a lot of the first early games were completely text-based, and if you want something text-based, then adventure games actually work rather well. Let's see, it's different programming, type in programs, VIC-20, ZX81, MZ80K. What is an MZ80K? I don't know. Maybe that's another computer I haven't heard of before. Was that this Sharp one? I can't remember now. Atom. Football Manager. A great new game for, excuse me, Addictive Games. I suppose that's a good name for a developer, isn't it? Addictive Games. Everyone wants to make addictive games. Let's see, what have we got here? It's a cave, it looks like. It's a logic puzzle. I'll not look at that right now. More ZX stuff. ZX. Oh, there's a useful one. Weather. An endless variety of completely inaccurate weather forecasts. Okay. Sketch. Draw an almost full-screen picture and save on cassette. Why almost full screen? Maybe that's all there's room for in the memory. Silversoft, Star Trek game, exciting space adventure game, Klingon star bases, phasers, etc. Well, that's really tells you what the game is about, doesn't it? Super Wumpus. Wampus. Can you hunt and catch a mysterious Wampus? Intriguing underground. I can't decide whether it's Wumpus or Wampus with a U or an O. Graphic Golf. Hyphenated. Test your golfing skills on Silversoft's 18-hole golf course. Many hazards, including lakes, streams, trees, etc. 3D Mystery Maze. Amazing three-dimensional display. Fast machine code display. Hundreds, should have been the D there. Hundreds of mazes. Oh my god, that's so full of spelling mistake, this one. Fantastic. Value for money. Nearly 50k programs on one cassette. Lunar Laner. It should have been Lunar Lander, I suppose. Master. It is spelled Mastermind correctly. Oh, hang on. What's this? Super Kit. That's like a breadboard for electronics. So I suppose they want to try to make people make their own computers almost. Let's see. Integrated circuits, breadboard LEDs. £20. Well, that's quite a bit for an electronics kit. Okay. Big 20. Volkscomputer, like Volkswagen, I suppose. That's what they're going for there. And indeed it was. It was really hitting the sweet spot for the common man and child when it was released. Add a professional keyboard to your ZX81. That's a common issue, isn't it? Still, no casing. Are you meant to replace the original inside? Okay. Maybe. A ZX81 workstation, so you put your ZX81 in there, and this whole thing around it is stylish and ergonomic plinth for the ZX81, raises and tilts the TV to avoid eye strain. Holds a 16K RAM in place and hides the wiring and power supply. That looks quite nice, actually. £15, built-in power switch is £3. Not bad. Let's see, Astro Birds, Galaxian, of course, another of those early games that everyone copied. Demon Dungeon, adventure game. Find the treasure in the depths of the dungeons. Beware the lurking demons whilst making your escape. Okay. Vic Games, Arctic Computing. I've heard about Arctic Computing. I think they lived a bit longer than some of the ones in here. And what else have we got? A and F. Cylon Attack, so that's Battlestar Galactica based game. Intercept the invading Cylon fleet, fast moving 3D action, constant instruments displayed includes long range scanner, fuel and laser energy, blah blah blah. This is for. Doesn't actually say. Does not actually say which platform this is for. Okay. That's not very good. I'm not going to sell much if nobody knows which computer. Oh, then. Okay, now available for UK 101 Superboards. So maybe it's the UK 101, but it's not obvious, so they wouldn't sell much. We'll get lots of phone calls, probably. Except they don't have a phone number. Oh, there it is. Yes, they do have a phone number. Abacus controller for cassette-based systems. Save and load faster and more reliably. Okay, I don't know anything about that. That's interesting. Hewson Protoss keyboard. Lots of keyboards for the ZXs in the end here. Oh, and then it is Avon Computer Rentals. This is Fred McNash, who has no cash. He can't compute without some loot. With things so expensive, he feels very pensive, but don't be sad, it's not that bad. We have many perms of easy terms. Apply for quotation for your edification. Oh dear. Well, they didn't write any good advertising poetry in the early 80s either. Well, no surprise there. Oh, hang on. There's a game for ZX81 adult games. For jaded minds, bad taste is our specialty. So there's a game called Can of Worms, and it's got games called Acne, Vasectomy, Smut, Hitler, Dole, Royal Flush, and that looks like a king sitting on a throne in the sense of a, well, toilet. Reagan, P's and Q's. Right. And then there's Love and Death. This is cassette number 2. Seduction, Conception, Birth, Rubik's Pube, On the Job, Pox, Dr. Death, and God, it looks like. Followed by The Bible, Genesis, Adam and Eve, Noah, Plagues, Exodus, Holy Moses, Sodom, that's probably their favorite one, Goliath, Jonah, and Bethlehem. Let's see. Prices include bizarre audio intros, revoltingly descriptive instructions. Right. That is a really bizarre thing. Does anyone know anything about these games? Right. Well. Okay. ZX81, blah, blah, blah. Ada home computers. Let's see what we got. The TI-99, that's the Texas Instruments. The Atari 400, 800. No surprises there. Put your micro to work. Control machines, robots, factory, or home. So you can actually control things in your home with a microcomputer. That was quite an early idea that didn't really take off. Excuse me. So, yeah. So there are lots of things of these early magazines. They show you ways to control things in your home with your computer and with the different interfaces. And yeah, people still don't really do that so much. Even though now you can do a lot more with Bluetooth. You still don't open your door and switch off your light with a Bluetooth as often as you would with a switch on the wall. Right, and that is the end of it. And this is Byte Shop Computerland, VIC-20. See it here, buy it now at your local branch today. There we go.
Right, so that was the little look at your computer from March 1982. Did you find it interesting? Did you think I was rambling a little bit too much in the beginning? I know I think so. Well, if you have any comments, please leave them below, and if you don't have any comments, don't. I will be looking forward to seeing you next time. I probably will be looking at more magazines soon because, especially now that I am buying some new ones and I have a little pile lying about here, and of course there will be more of them that are more from my time, you might say, and so I would know more about what was going on. But it definitely is interesting to me to look at these old magazines and seeing what's in them. It's a little piece of history now, and it's quite an interesting part of history because of the evolution and revolution of computing in those days. So that's it for now, and thank you very much for watching. If you watched all the way to this bit, you are very patient. And I will see you again next time, or you will see me because I can't see you. And goodbye for now. Bye bye.